Another thing I'm really delighted to share with you tonight is our guest speaker, Evie West. Evie West has come to us from Cleveland, Tennessee. We're so glad she came out west. She is a former Los Angeles gang member. We will hear from her story about how God can take a messy situation and restore it to his good and for his purpose. She also understands how someone comes to the decision to abort their child, as well as what it feels like to give birth to their baby and not take him home. She speaks with heartfelt compassion on pro-life issues. She also serves at her local pregnancy center, New Hope Pregnancy Care in Cleveland, Tennessee. Evie is married to Brandon, and they have 2 grown children, and we are so delighted to have her here. Please join me in welcoming Evie West.
Thanks, Marcy.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm looking for my water. I've drank like 4 gallons of water. I've been here like less than 24 hours. Here's electrolytes. I'm going to need that. So don't get offended if I drink water. I need Blistex. My nose is on fire. No one prepped me for this. But it's funny because a lot of people go, you know, she's from Tennessee. They're like, you don't sound like you're from Tennessee. I'm like, thank God. But then Marcy kind of gave you a little clue when she said that I was from Los Angeles. Today, I needed to get my hair done. I didn't bring my curling iron. So I made an appointment at a salon nearby my hotel, which is just a couple blocks from here. And so I walk in, the girl, she shampoos my hair, and then she starts doing it, and she says, so where are you from? And I said, Tennessee. You're from Tennessee? And I said, yeah. She said, she's from Tennessee. This girl's from Tennessee. And you're from Tennessee? I'm like, yes. And then this lady comes around the corner. She's like, who's from Tennessee? She's from Tennessee. Wow. And I'm thinking, you're from Tennessee. Yeah. I've never seen anyone from Tennessee. And I thought, I don't know, I kind of felt like some exotic animal. And I was just like, I don't know if I should be like, hey, you know. So then I was leaving, and then, you know, I was walking out, and I said, thank you so much. And she goes up, and she goes, like, she's from Tennessee. And the girls go, oh my gosh, I know someone from Tennessee. Do you know Camden? I was like, no. I was like, bye. So anyway, you guys are so awesome. I've never been to Colorado before. First time. My family actually flew in tonight at 6 o'clock, and we're going to spend the rest of the week here. So I'm excited about that, because a lot of times when I fly in to speak, I literally fly in, I stay, go and I speak, and I stay in the night in a hotel, and I fly back out. So I am really ready for some recommendations on where we can go this week. So if you think of any, you can tell me after. But just like Marcy said, born and raised in California, Southern California, Anaheim area, Garden Grove. I really came from a good family. My parents were great people. They actually met in Cleveland, Tennessee in 1964. My dad's from Mexico. He didn't know any English, so he learned a Beatles song, like, I Want to Hold Your Hand, said it to my mom. She fell in love with him, and then they left Cleveland and went to Mexico to be missionaries for 2 years and ended up in California. And so for the first 12 years of my life was good. I mean, I lived in a bubble. I went to a Christian school. We were in church on Wednesday nights. We were in church on Sunday mornings and Sunday nights. I never experienced anything bad. But when I was 12 years old, my mom lost her job at the airlines, and because the company went bankrupt. And so they had to put me and my sister in public school. And so I knew my dad was from Mexico. I knew I loved Mexican food. I knew that we spoke Spanish. I had a Spanish last name, but I didn't look like the people in my school. 95% of the girls and boys in my school look like Lauren, right? She's beautiful, dark skin, black hair, Mexican Americans, and I didn't look like them. I was white with green eyes. Now my sister has dark hair and dark skin, so she fit in really well. Well, because I didn't look like them, because I looked white, I was bullied. And so a year of being jumped and being assaulted and being robbed of money, finally had a decision to make. I could either tell on these people, or I could join them. Well, I couldn't tell on them because their parents, these kids in sixth grade were 12, 13 years old, and their parents were 24, and their grandparents were 36. So I knew that if I told on them that their parents they were gang members too. They would kill my parents, literally. And so I thought, how am I going to do this? And a super long story short, I made a decision to get jumped in a gang. And it was purely for protection so I could get through school. 95% of our school was Mexican Americans. 85, 86% of those were gang members. And so I began a life, living a double life. At home, I was the Christian little girl I was supposed to be, going to church with my parents. When I went to school, I was a gang member. But as time went on, I began looking like them, talking like them, dressing like them, acting like them, until eventually my heart became so dark. Everything that they did, I wanted to experience. Smoking dope, drinking, fighting, assaults, robberies, vandalism, even up to death. So I recruited people. I recruited my cousin. I was very active in gang life, and my parents, because they were so naive about what was going on, I would just leave the house. I never told them when I was coming back. My mom started staying up. Of course, she would say, "You're not going out," and I would say, "I'm leaving," and I would leave. And so with all the things that I was doing came a relationship with one of the gang members, and at 16, I found myself pregnant. I went home and I told my parents I'm pregnant. I was excited about it because the guy that I was pregnant by had so much notoriety and he had so much street credits that he was well respected. And so that kind of put me to a different level as well. So at 16, I had my baby, and it was a little boy. His name was Josh. I went into the hospital. I birthed him. I came home, and after 7 days, I was so bored that I literally put my son with a babysitter and went back to school. And when I went back to school, I went back to partying, and I went back to smoking dope, and I went back to getting high and getting drunk and partying and doing all these criminal activities. There was one specific time where I was hanging in my neighborhood, the gang neighborhood, and a rival gang came through and made a U-turn. And so I ran up to the car because that's what you're supposed to do when you're a gang member. You should be willing to die for your neighborhood, even though you don't even live there. So I went up to the car, and the driver sticks a gun in my face, and he pulls the trigger, and it says, "click." And he drives off. To this day, I don't know if the weapon malfunctioned, if he knew that it wasn't loaded, I don't know. There was another incident where I was at a basketball game, and someone says, "Hey, there's some chick in the alley that wants to fight you." I didn't know who the girl was, so I was like, all right. So I go down there in the alley, it was just me and her. And she said, "I'm gonna kill you because you're messing with my boyfriend." I was like, "I don't even know who you are." So she's standing there, and I'm thinking, how am I gonna talk to this girl? She had a big knife. I said, how am I gonna talk her into dropping this knife? So I was like, "Hey, put that down, let's just fight one-on-one, I don't have anything else, put it down." She's like, "No, I'm gonna kill you." And I was thinking in my head, I'm about to die in this alley. I don't even know this chick. Like, she's got the wrong person. So a few seconds later, she looked over my head, she backed up, and she ran. And when I turned around, there was no one behind me. Instances like that happened so many times throughout my life. I was at a dinner last night with some close friends and supporters of alternatives, and I was telling them that there was a drive-by at my house. It was 11 o'clock at night. We should have been in bed. My parents should have been in bed. But when the rival gang came by my house, they shot 6 times. 4 of those bullets pierced my parents' bed. But because their pastor had called and said he had locked the keys inside the car or inside the church, my dad and my mom and me got up and drove down to the church. The police officer came into my house. There was 2 of them, 2 males. And I stood there, and he looked at me and said, "Who shot your house?" Well, I wasn't going to tell him because I was going to tell my homeboys and they would take care of it. I said, "I don't know." And he said, "What gang are you in?" And my mom, "What? No, my daughter's not in a gang." He's like, "Lady, are you crazy? Like, look at your daughter. Look at the way she's standing. Look at her eyebrows. Look at the way, yes, she is in a gang." So he took me in my bedroom and he closed the door and he said, "You're going to tell me who shot your house. I cannot believe that you would disrespect your parents like this, that they could have shot your parents if they would have been in bed." And I would not tell him. And as he was talking to me, he was calling me names and putting his finger on my chest and saying, "You're going to tell us, you're going to tell us." That's how life was for me. The police knew where I lived. The police came. They were on my heels all the time. It was just a few short months later that my boyfriend went to take a kilo of cocaine to New York. The drug dogs were at the airport in LAX, and they popped him, and he went to prison. So he was gone, 5 years gone. I graduated from high school. I got a job. But what was so set up, what was so great for me is that I could go anywhere I wanted at any time I wanted, and I always had my parents there to take care of my son. So if I was at home, I would take care of him. But if I wasn't there, my parents were there. And my mom, who was a prayer warrior, would sit up on the couch every single time I left the house and stay there until I came home safely. Sometimes it was 3 a.m., sometimes it was 4 a.m. And so since my boyfriend was in prison, I was messing around with other guys and doing stuff I shouldn't have been doing, until one night I came home. It was probably 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was altered, so I don't know if I was drunk or if I was high, and my mom said, "Evie, come in here." And I said, "Mom, I'm tired, I want to go to bed." My mom literally would stay there until 4 a.m. till I got home, and then she would go to bed, and then wake up 2 hours later to go to work. So I said, "Mom, I'm tired, I want to go to bed." And she's like, "Come in here." So she hands me this letter that she had written me, and I skimmed through it, and I saw a line that said, "The umbilical cord is now cut." I said, "Mom, what is this supposed to mean? What do you mean by that? You're going to kick me out of this house?" She said, "I cannot live like this anymore. I am literally going crazy. Every time I hear sirens, I think the police are coming to tell me that you're dead somewhere. I can't live like this anymore." So I said, "Oh, you're going to just kick me and your grandson out on the street." Tried manipulation. And I thought, well, I'll come home a little bit earlier, and maybe she'll forget about it. It was about 2 weeks later that I walked in, 5 o'clock, and there were 2 big bags, suitcases by the door. And I said, "What is this?" And she said, "You're leaving." And I was like, "Where am I going?" And she said, "Cleveland, Tennessee." And I said, "What in the heck is that? What is that? No one knows what Tennessee is from California. You know, I didn't want to go to Tennessee. I was like, "Mom, seriously?" She's like, "You're leaving. Your flight leaves in, 3 hours." So I walked back out. I walked to the liquor store, which was literally a quarter of a mile from my house. I got on the payphone. I called my boyfriend at the time. And I said, "Hey, can me and Josh, my 2-year-old, can we live with you? My mom's kicking us out of the house." He said, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Well, it's perfect. He was a gang member too. He was from a big gang from where I was from, and so I thought, well, I'll walk back to the house. My bags are packed. I'll grab those bags, and I'll leave. That's what my mom wants. That's what I'll give her. Well, 10 minutes came, 15, 20, he never showed up. So my dad grabs my bags, and he says, "All right, let's go." Puts them in the trunk, and I was mad. I thought, Tennessee, do they even have roads there? Like, they probably chew on hay, wear overalls. Like, I don't want to go there. It's not cool there. My dad said, "Evie, you better take a jacket." I was wearing shorts and a tank top. I was like, I'm not taking a stupid jacket. In California, it's 75 degrees on Christmas. I'm not taking a jacket. So they take me to LAX. This was before 9/11, so my parents actually walked with me to the gate, and I was mad, and I was not going to say anything to them. So I grabbed my little boy, and I went and I sat at the gate, and when they called us to go on to board the plane, I didn't even say goodbye to my parents. I grabbed my little boy, and he was like reaching over my shoulder for my parents, and I didn't even say goodbye to them, and I got on the plane. And I was so angry, and I said, they're going to regret this. And the plane left Los Angeles, flew all the way to Atlanta, Georgia on January 8th, 1996. I'm wearing shorts and a tank top, and there's like 2 feet of snow on the ground. I should have listened to my dad. Somebody picked me up. They took me to Cleveland, Tennessee, to an empty apartment. I slept on the floor that night with my son. And I got up the next day and went to Lee College, which is now Lee University. And there was about 100 Marcies there. Hi, welcome to Cleveland. This is fun. And I was like, get out of my face. Like, I was a gang member. My hair was all crazy like a gang member. I was wearing a Cowboys jersey. Mexican-American gang members. I had surrounded myself like that for years with them. And it was all these white people, and like Marcy. And they were so excited about life, and I was just like, oh my, I don't even want to be here, and so they said, we'll take you to your classroom. And I was like, oh my gosh. So here I was, I was taking my little 2-year-old boy to the class, and I'd sit him on the floor, and he had snacks and he had toys, and I sat there and I looked around the classroom and everyone was writing something, so I figured I was supposed to write something. And so the weeks progressed. 1 week, 2 weeks, girls would come up to me, I don't even know, hey, is this your little boy? He's so cute. We'll take him for you while you're in class. I was like, all right, thanks. It's Christian campus, so okay, fine, what could happen? So they would take him out into Alumni Park, and I would finish with class, and I'd come out, and, I didn't really know anybody there, and I was like, hey, have you guys seen a little Mexican boy running around? And they knew him. They're like, Josh? Yeah, he's in the rec center. And I was like, what is this, But that's so pivotal because they loved someone so ugly. I was so ugly. And so I had to go to chapel. It's a Christian university. I had to go to chapel on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I hated it. I didn't listen. Sunday at 6 p.m., you had to go to chapel. So after about 6 or 7 weeks there, I went to chapel, and I was sitting there, and the man was preaching, and he was saying, God pursues us. He comes after us. He loves us. Aren't you tired of running from him? And I was like, is this guy talking? This guy's talking to me. And I had my little boy in my arms, and I was like looking around. I'm like, well, you don't have anything to do. Here, hold my son. And I walked down to the front in front of 2,000 students, and I stood at the altar, and I raised my hand, and I was like, God, I am disgusting. I have done awful things to people. Why would you pursue me? Why would you want me? And he says, because I love you. I created you. And that night, I rededicated my life to Jesus Christ. And I'm not joking. It's insane how he began to transform me physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Physically, like I started incorporating pinks and reds in my wardrobe. I wasn't just all gang membered out anymore. I started talking different. I actually got through a couple sentences without saying a cuss word. Things just started really changing in my life. I started reading the Bible, and it's like the Word of God it was so sharp that it just began to just cut off all the stuff that was just old and disgusting in my life. Man, things were looking great. My mom was proud of me. I was in college. I was taking care of my son. I wasn't partying. I didn't have to worry about the night before any police coming and knocking on my doors. Things were great, and I had just rededicated my life to Christ. It couldn't have got better. And so life was good for me, and then one Sunday morning, I wake up to go to church, and I threw up in the toilet. And I said, oh my God, I don't throw up unless I'm pregnant. And I was like, this is not happening. So I sucked my stomach in, and I felt on the left side of my stomach a ball about the size of my fist. And I said, are you kidding me right now? How in the world am I pregnant? This is not happening. I knew I was. So I freaked out. I grabbed the phone book. I looked under A for abortion, and I found one abortion clinic in Cleveland, Tennessee. New Hope Pregnancy Crisis Center. I was like, yes, okay. So I'm gonna go in there, and I'm gonna have an abortion, and I'm not gonna tell anybody, and I'll forget about it, and Jesus will forgive me because that's what he does. Perfect. So I call, and I knew that abortion was wrong. When the lady said New Hope Pregnancy Crisis Center, I said, I need your services, and she said, come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. So I walk in at 10 a.m. the next day, and I fill this paperwork out, and at the bottom it says, what church do you belong to? And I'm like, why are they asking me that? I'm not going to tell them I'm a Christian. So I just put NA. And so when they told me to come back to the room to get my urine test, I looked to the left and saw a Bible. So I went to do my urine test. I went in this little counseling room, and the lady comes in, and I said, ma'am, is this a Christian place? And she said, yes. And I said, why are you in the phone book under abortion? And she said, no, it's post-abortion recovery. Well, it's my first semester of college. I didn't know pre, post. I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, okay, and just go ahead and say what you got to say. Well, let me tell you what we do. I was like, ma'am, let me just tell you this, okay? I said, I am 19 years old. I have a 2-year-old son. I just moved here from California, 2,000 miles away from my family. I'm in a Christian university. I cannot be pregnant. I cannot be pregnant. And she said, okay, well, what are you thinking? And I said, I'm thinking that I'm going to have an abortion. And if I can't do it here, I'm going somewhere else. And so she said, well, let's talk about this. I said, I don't want to talk to you. I do not want to talk to you. I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want you to waste my time, because nothing that you say is going to matter. Well, let's just talk about this. I said, ma'am, this is not going to work good for you. I am leaving here, and I'm going to have an abortion. And if I can't get it here, I'll go somewhere else. So she was wringing her hands, and she walked out and came back in and walked out. And she said, will you watch this video before you leave? So she puts this video on, she comes back in and leaves a box of Kleenexes there next to me. And so it comes on, and this guy's talking, and you see a baby, inside like an ultrasound picture. And I watched horrific images of a DNC, of a partial birth abortion that absolutely wrecked my life. And when I saw that, it did educate me. And I know now that pregnancy centers don't show these videos. In fact, I know Alternative does not show these videos. But the thing that was so profound to me is that this woman, and after the years had gone by, she told me, I went out and we got on our knees, Evie, the director, the lady that sat at the front desk, and we prayed and said, God, how are we going to convince this? How are we going to tell this girl? How are we going to show this girl that what she's about to do can affect her entire life? And God knows me. He's like, she's a stubborn one, so put the video on. They're like, no, we don't show that video. He's like, put it on. I'm telling you, breaks every policy. This girl is crazy. And so they put it on, and it literally wrecked me. But the problem was about seeing that video is that abortion was no longer an option for me. It was an option when I walked in, so I wasn't so upset. But when I walked out of there, I was more helpless and more hopeless than I had walked in, because I had to have this baby. And so I was nervous about it, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went to my apartment, and I cried for hours, thinking, how am I going to get out of this now? I'm going to get kicked out of Lee. My parents are not going to be proud of me. I'm 19. I have no money, no job. How am I going to do this? It literally was 2 weeks later that I had come in from school, and I looked in my cabinets, and there was a bag of popcorn, and I had about that much milk. So I popped the bag of popcorn. It was a Friday night. I gave my son the milk. Here I'm pregnant. I have no idea how far along I am. I gave my son the milk. I gave him the popcorn, and I put him in bed. And I said, God, I don't even have food to eat, but I'm pregnant. So I went to bed, and I prayed, and I thought, okay, tomorrow I'll wake up. It'll be Saturday. I'll take my son, Josh, to the park, and I don't know what I'm going to eat. I couldn't tell my parents. I didn't know about food banks. The morning came very quickly. I got my son out of bed. I stood him on the toilet, and I said, Joshy, we're going to go to the park, and we're going to play, and we're going to get on the swings and go down the slide. And I was brushing his teeth, and I was washing his face, and I was combing his hair. And I was talking 100 miles a minute because I didn't want him to ask me for food. And so I put him down, and I remember my stomach hurt. I was hungry, and I put his little jacket on, and I walked him across the living room floor. And I opened up the front door, and there was 6 full bags of groceries on my doorstep. And I looked at that, and it was like milk and orange juice and bread and peanut butter. And Josh was like, Mom, park. And I was like, no, eggs. Let's eat some eggs. Come on. And I said to myself, Lord, how am I going to, I can't even, someone has brought me these groceries. I can't even provide that for myself and my son. And it was just a few weeks later that I had gotten involved in a choir at Lee. And so we had gone off sometime in March. We went off for a spring break tour. And I was 135 pounds, and I was wearing a robe, a choir robe. I was skinny. I was not showing. I had no idea how far along I was. But I went to the altar that night, and I prayed, and I prayed. I didn't tell a soul about I was pregnant, and I prayed, and I felt this lady put her hand on me, and I heard her praying for me. And then I stood up, and I wanted to say thank you for praying for me. And she looked at me and she said, honey, the Lord spoke to me about you and told me that you're pregnant. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why would you tell people I'm pregnant? This cannot happen. And so I freaked out. I said, ma'am, please, like, it wasn't like a huge surprise because I know God speaks. I know he does. And I said, ma'am, please do not tell anybody from the choir or anybody. I will get kicked out of Lee. This lady became my mother over the next course of the few months. And she called me every week and said, Evie, where are we at? I said, I don't have money. She said, go to Starview Drive, apply for TennCare. It's free health insurance. And I said, okay. I went and did that. Okay, now what? Now you need to find OBGYN. Here's 3. I recommend you go to this one. And I went. And it was probably April when this happened. Well, my parents came and stayed a week with me and left, had no idea I was pregnant. So the doctor says, you're due in July. This was April. So May came, the university, we had our finals, everyone took their finals, and they split, and it was like a ghost town in Cleveland. And my stomach popped out. And so I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I hid. I didn't want anyone seeing me. I stayed in my apartment a lot. And I was thinking, how am I going to get through this? And so one day she calls me and she says, have you considered adoption? And I said, no way am I doing that. And she said, Evie, you were going to abort. So she said, here is a pastor in another state, and here's a family that's in his congregation, and they're looking to adopt. If you want to pursue that, here's their number. It was a week later that I called them, and they came down from Ohio to Tennessee, and I spent time with them over the weekend, and then the next weekend, and then the next weekend. And I finally decided, these are the people that God has placed in my life to care for my child. So it was July, after the first week of July, I was due more toward the end, and I wrote my parents a letter, and I said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I'm pregnant, I'm due in 3 weeks, and I am so sorry. And just in typical mom fashion, of course, this was 1996, so I had to send the letter, and it was 3 days till my mom got it, and she left a recording on my answering machine and said, Evie, we love you. I am so sorry. Of course, she was crying. I'm sorry you've had to go through this by yourself. So my mom sends my sister the week that I'm due to Tennessee, because my mom was in the process of moving my grandmother from California to Virginia. My sister comes on the second day, third day. She said, dude, I have to leave, so drink this castor oil because you have to have this baby. So I was like, okay, I do anything my sister says. So I drank the castor oil. Literally 20 hours later, I went into labor. And I birthed on July 30th of 1996, a beautiful, black-headed, dark-skinned baby boy. And he was beautiful. And I was so tired after going through that process. And I remember the nurse coming in and said, honey, we'll take him from you so that you could get some rest. And I said, no, I don't know if I'll ever get to see him again. And so over the course of 10 hours, I prayed for him. I kissed him. I hugged him. I looked at him. I talked to him, and I said, I am so sorry that I have to do this. And I said, I hope that one day you'll understand how much I love you. I'm not giving you away because I don't love you. I want to give you more than I can give you. It was the worst thing that I have experienced in my life. It's not natural. And for women who have birthed children and you have those children in your arms, you're laying in the hospital, it is so unnatural to hand that baby to somebody else. And for men in here who stood by their wives and watched as their children were born, imagine watching someone else take him away. So I went through that day and we took pictures, and I remember looking at that hospital clock on the wall. And at 5:30, they were coming to pick him up. And they gave me some alone time. And when that hand hit 5 p.m., I couldn't breathe. It was like I was in Denver. I couldn't breathe. Like I was just so overwhelmed with emotion. The tips of my fingers hurt down to my toes, and I felt like there was a ton of bricks on my chest. And I was like, Lord, how am I gonna do this? And I mean, I felt within minutes warm water being poured from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. The Holy Spirit was so present during that time. And when 5:30 came, they wheeled me out, and I put my son in a car seat, and I watched as they drove off. I had a decision to make after that happened. I could be depressed and be sad and decide that I was going to stay under the covers for the rest of my life, or I could continue studying and saying, I have someone else that's looking at me. I have to succeed because there are things that God wants me to do. And that's what I chose. And I finished college, and I had been speaking at a local high school about my gang affiliation, and the teacher was a police officer, and one day he said, hey, do you want a job? And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool to be a secretary in the police department, and like officers come by and you're like, here, do you need a pen? You know? So I filled out the application, and I said, hey, right here where it says position applied for, like, what do you want me to put? And he's like, police officer. And I'm like, Sergeant Simpson, seriously? I was like a total turd growing up. How am I going to be a police officer? And he's like, just write everything down, everything. And so I did. And they hooked me up to a polygraph test, and the chief calls me in, and he says, Lastra, I'm going to give you one chance, and if you mess up, you're gone. That was 18 years ago. And the Lord has used me so profound in that way because of my past. I understand why women sell their bodies on the corner. I understand how people get addicted to methamphetamine and opioids. I understand why people go to alcohol because of issues that they have dealt with, and it's always something. And it takes just sitting down, looking at someone in the eyes, and saying, why are you addicted to methamphetamine? Oh, I like it. I like it. Why do you like to get high? I was molested by my uncle when I was 7. He raped me. He did this to me. He did that to me. And so when you hear that, you say, everyone is dealing with something. But the awesome thing about Jesus is that he is our hope. He is our high. And so I have immersed myself in helping others and tried to be an influence for my son, to let him know that even though you make bad choices in life, that doesn't brand you. So it doesn't matter if you've had an abortion, or you've made a bad decision in your life, or you've tried drugs, or you've done this, or you've hurt this person. God is a redeemer, and he loves you just like he loves me. And one is not better than the other because we are all his children. And thank God for alternatives. Thank God for redemption. Thank God for restoration. So I am currently a sergeant of our community relations unit. My second son, his name is Joel. He graduated from high school, made a 35 on his ACT, and got a full 4-year scholarship to Miami University in Ohio, where he's currently a senior, graduating in May with a computer science degree. And on March 12th of last year, he contacted my sister on Facebook and said, "I want to meet your family." And on March 25th of last year, he walked into my home. Now, the reunion, I understand that that is not the story for everybody. But I do understand that God really ordained every single step because there is a purpose, not only for just my life, but the lives of people that hear these stories. And I will tell you one thing right now. If it had not been for the pregnancy center in Cleveland, Tennessee, I would be up here sharing a different story if I was up here at all. Pregnancy centers are so important. And you look at me and think, oh, this is a California girl from Tennessee. But I know it sounds funny. But really, I represent every woman in Colorado who walks in alternatives to say, you don't understand what I'm going through. You don't know what it feels like. I cannot have this baby. And when I walked into alternatives yesterday and Marcy took me around and introduced me to every single person there, I saw love on their faces. I saw this welcoming attitude. And I can't remember who said it up here tonight. Maybe Marcy said it or someone else. But the thing that was so amazing is that the focus is not just on the unborn, but the person. And that is so profound to me because I don't think of it that way. I haven't. But those people did that in 1996 when I walked in there. And it is because of you. You're here tonight because you support alternatives. You are the heroes because although you may not be connected as some of the volunteers or the coordinators that are working for alternatives or Marcy or Jesse, you are such a big part of this because you support alternatives. So tonight in closing, I'm going to ask you to do something. And Lauren can come up here, and I am ending, so I want to tell you this. I want to challenge all of you. Please, listen to me. Please stretch yourself. And I'm saying this because I'm also a supporter of my pregnancy center. Stretch yourself. If you have been giving a certain amount, can you give a little bit more? Can you go double? Can you stretch yourself to say, hey, I fully believe in this mission, and I want someone to walk into alternatives not knowing the difference between pre and post, walk in there and say, I can't have this baby, and the people of alternatives to love them and to say, I love you, and because I love you, I love that baby. And let me tell you how we can help you. Because that is what our mission is as Jesus followers, because we are the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. So don't stay in the same place. If you gave $1,000 last year, give $2,000 this year. If you give $50 a month, give $100 a month. I'm asking you to do that because this is the hands and feet of Jesus in Denver, Colorado, and the other locations that Alternative serves in Colorado. May the Lord bless you.